Okay, let's move on. Want to do actual news for a second?
Let's do it.
So Donald Trump had an interview on NPR. Apparently, he stormed out of an interview, which I don't hear of Trump actually doing that very often. He usually sticks to it at the end. He likes people listening to it. So I wanted to play that because I actually have no idea what happens in this interview. I haven't read the transcript. I haven't looked through it. I just saw that he stormed out. So you want to listen to it?
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Does this quick or
it's 7 minutes. Storms out. So yeah, it's pretty short.
Ask about another piece of news here. South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds, as I think you know, was on ABC over the weekend. He spoke about the 2020 election and also referred to the election campaign that is now starting in 2022. Let's listen.
We simply did not win the election as Republicans for the presidency. And if we simply look back and tell our people don't vote because, there's cheating going on, then we're going to put ourselves in a huge disadvantage.
A couple of things to ask about there, Mr. President. Let's start with the politics. Is it a disadvantage for Republicans to keep talking about the 2020 election in 2022?
No, I think it's an advantage because otherwise they're going to do it again in 22 and 24. And Rounds is wrong on that, totally wrong. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the findings.
Can we just say, I don't think we talk about it enough, to be completely honest, how absolutely pathetic it is that this guy got blown out. And he just can't accept it. So he's just created a massive conspiracy theory where the election was stolen from him. And he thinks it's not obvious what he's done, considering he said before the election, if I lose, it's rigged. Meaning that there was no way he was going to accept it in the first place.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's true or not, as long as his base is buying it, right? They're still buying it. They're still trying to fight for it.
I think it's around 50%, like 55 to 60% buy it. But if only 60% of your own party supports something, that's dangerous when you talk about primaries and really red districts. But when you talk about the general consensus of the country, the most Americans don't believe it. But it is dangerous for the future of the Republican Party, most certainly.
Do you think if he gets elected as the nominee, that he would then stop saying that the election was stolen last time around?
No, he's still going to, because it rouse up his base, and it's basically his way of demonizing the opposition.
But it might make him look I don't know, like Dylan's saying, it's only 60% of the 50%.
I think he
they'll still nobody is going to not vote for. I don't think people are not going to vote for Trump because he's still advocating for the election. Republicans will still vote for him over the Democrat, right? We're seeing.
I think there's certain people who won't, and the thing is, there's consequences that come from it. That, for example, January 6th is directly correlative with what he said about the election. Because if you didn't believe it was stolen, that you wouldn't have even been there in the first place.
But think about how many times, I guess how they would describe it as rhinos, people who are Republican but anti-Trump or anti-Trump rhetoric. Think about how those people have done. People I don't know, Matt Walsh. Justin Amash was libertarian, so it's independent or whatever. But Justin Amash is another example. They're essentially ostracized, right? Liz Cheney. These Republicans are standing against Trump and saying yeah, this type of rhetoric is really dumb, even though some of the policies we might have agreements on. They're not popular with the Republican Party, period. I don't think this will really have that effect on the Republican Party or Trump, period.
I think you're right, but I think there is something to be said about independence. And I do think this type of rhetoric does make him see off of his rocker, and it makes an easier argument to sell it to people to say, hey, this is somebody who's fundamentally dangerous for our democracy. And I think it's easier to sell the independents, because independents, I think, are easier to be swayed on this topic, and those are the people who usually decide elections. Yes, Dylan, you're right. I agree with you. Oh, thank you, Gappy. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm not sure we can say independents are necessarily the people who decide elections. I think a big part of it is just straight up voter turnout, right? For example, I believe generally in midterms there's less Democratic voter turnout than Republican turnout, or it might be the other way around. I forgot. But generally there's less turnout for 2022, 2026, those types of elections versus the main presidential elections. And that can have a big impact as a result, right? Because we have way less people turning up. The lack of, or the attacks against universal voting and mail-in voting, for example, will probably have a way bigger impact than what a couple independents might be able to do. Because it really comes down to how many people can you turn out to the polls, right? There might be 50,000 progressives in a county, but if only 10,000 show up to vote for the progressive candidate, then there's no point.
So
right?
I think there's a middle ground here, and I think we would both agree to this, that it's a combination of voter turnout in swaying those people, those independents. And it's always a balance, and this is what most politicians do, of balancing, trying to make sure to appeal to independents who are not necessarily aligned with your party, while also trying to motivate your base to come out and support you and donate and get involved. And that's what most politicians end up doing a balancing act with, and they end up either on more, if they're in more of a blue district, they usually are more interested in motivating their base because they have a larger base, or if they're in like a swing area or a red district, then they're more concentrated on trying to appeal to independents. That's usually how it goes. That's not gospel, but that's usually how it goes.
There's got to be some sort of statistics on people who voted for Trump but switched to vote for Biden, right? It can't be zero, I don't think, right?
It's a lot of it has to do with suburbans, communities specifically, suburbia.
Yeah, because I think back in 2016, and I feel like some people might say they disagree with this, but I think it's 100% true of everybody. Like, people were under the impression that, like, oh shit, okay, maybe Trump won't be that bad, right? Like, maybe Trump's just like, I don't know, like playing to his base or whatever. Like, maybe every now and then
he'll tone it down after the election.
Yeah, maybe he'll tone it down. He's just trying to like be a businessman or like say like pitch himself to people, right? Because he's not a traditional politician. But not only was it that bad, it was significantly worse than what we expected. Like people. Lots of people, especially in suburban areas, thought like, oh, you know what? Maybe he's like a smart businessman. Maybe it's just like some faux pas coming in right now on the campaign trail. But surely he won't be that stupid in office, right? He'll have a whole team and everything, right? But he managed to actually be that fucking dumb, as we saw.
Got you. Yeah, I generally agree. I would also say voter turnout in places like Georgia were like a huge part of our victory. 100%.
1,000,000%.
1 million.
Do you guys think that in America your election cycle is too long?
No, because I'm a political commentator. I wish we bought
I think that's why you got to become. That's why you got to start doing primarily games. All right. I always
somebody
have
just made an account called Chem Time just to write it's Chem Time baby in my chat.
Ban that guy. Get him. Tell him sub or ban. Either he's sub right now or
that's okay. Yeah, sub or ban for Chem Time baby. I do.
And you got to sub to me, not Dylan. Okay. You got to sub
to
all of us. Right.
All three.
No,
subs.
It's only me.
Three
it's
subs.
only me.
No, 3 subs. Listen, if Dylan bans you, can come to my chat.
Okay. Look, Dylan makes way more money than I do, okay? I'm the one in poverty here, okay? You got to support, you got to do some direct mutual aid here, all right?
I'm a poor
I'm a
poor graduate student.
I don't mean to like point towards my heater at all, but I'm just saying.
Well, that's because you still owe me $1 million and a personal heater after losing that bet.
True. Give me the money, and eventually I'll make sure the million gets to Gappy. Dr. Concepts, thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to Chem Time. They're safe for now. Okay, let's keep.
You should still ban them, right? You can still ban them if they don't gift the sub forward.
We only 43 seconds into the interview. Let's get a little further.
All right, go.
In Arizona, if you look at what's going on in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, by the way, and take a look at Wisconsin, they're finding things that nobody thought possible. This was a corrupt election.
I just have to point out Doug Logan, to name one of the states that you just named. Doug Logan, who ran the audit in Arizona that was set up by your allies, didn't find serious problems. This is a quote: "The ballots that were provided to us to count in the Coliseum very accurately correlate with the official canvass numbers." He raised a bunch of administrative issues, but didn't find a problem that would have changed the result at all.
The ballots may correspond, but look at the ballots themselves. The number of ballots doesn't mean anything. It's who signed the ballots, where did the ballots come from. What you really have to do in that report is look at the findings. And the findings are devastating for Arizona. They're devastating like nobody's seen before. Other states are just as bad.
Why did Republican officials in Arizona accept the results then?
Because they're rhinos, and frankly, a lot of people are questioning that. Why would they? They fought very hard, the Maricopa County people, and people don't understand it because all you have to do is look at the findings. And just so you know, some of those people went before Congress a short while ago, and they were grilled by Congressman Biggs. You ought to take a look at their testimony. They weren't able to answer anything. He made them look like fools. They couldn't answer a thing. They got up and gave a beautiful statement, and then when it came time to ask why this, why that, what about these votes, what about those votes, they look like...
I mean, this is obviously him coping, right? This is this person like directly saying, hey, look at these officials. The Republicans didn't object. No case. Like, they could do this all day. There's no case that Trump has.
I think
my question is, do you think he legitimately believes this, or do you think it's all PR because he doesn't want to publicly accept a loss?
Oh, I don't think any of us can. I don't think any of us can know the answer to that. I think it's absolutely
impossible.
Barring him like slipping somehow, or barring like I don't know, maybe we missed something in the PowerPoint that was leaked. Like, I don't think there's any way to speculate into the mindset here. Maybe he really is that stupid.
I mean, when 60% of the Republican Party believes it, then it's not that hard to think that Donald Trump could believe it.
Emperor's new clothes. That's it. He's just surrounded himself with people who agree with him. You know, it's like when Kanye West puts out those ugly clothes, and then nobody can tell him they're ugly and shit. It's the same
when
thing.
Drake talks about how he loves Toronto, even though every city in Canada is pretty trash, right?
Listen, I'm from Toronto. I hate Drake, so I'm not gonna defend. Fuck that guy.
Okay.
I think one interesting thing that comes up here is, like, as we've seen now, especially with this voter fraud, like, conspiracy, or the election fraud conspiracy, is that, like, basically Trump supporters and, like, Trump himself are turning on a lot of traditional Republicans, right?
Yep.
And I think what we're going to see in the primaries for 2022 is it's really going to be, at least for the Republican primary, who is most affiliated with Trump, who is most aligned and can say, like, yeah, dude, I'm ready to suck off Trump right now. You know, and like really, you know, say I'm for his platform, I'm for his policies, right?
Well, that's not even necessarily true, because Liz Cheney had a closer voting record with Donald Trump than a lot of than the person who ended up replacing her, just because she didn't buy into this conspiracy. So it doesn't even necessarily have to do with voting records. It just has to do with performative activism. For example, there's a lot of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene that get called out by people like Dan Crenshaw because she actually has voting records that don't align as closely with Trump as other people in Congress who would be considered more not Trumpian allies, even though they voted more closely with Trump. It has to do more with the personality. It has to do more with the performative actions, not really necessarily even the voting record.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's something. This might be a hot take. This is something that's been going on for years, right? This is something I'm not sure when it started or something, but I think generally primaries, be it Democrat, Republican, I don't know, Libertarian, putting toast in your own damn toaster. A lot of it just comes down to which person does the voter like more. Like, most voters are low information voters. Most voters are basically just voting off who they think, you know, vibes with them the best, right? So all it really takes is just them saying, like, I love Trump, soy, and then they'll probably get the vote. The problem is then, after the primary, the most Trump-aligned candidate is going to win, most likely, from the Republican primary. But then they go up to the general against Democrats, where Democrats are basically facing off against whoever is the most Marjorie Taylor Greene-esque from the local Republican Party or Republican pool, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of races between, like, a moderate or maybe even a progressive Democrat facing off against someone who's trying to be like Marjorie Taylor Greene 2 Electric Boogaloo.
There was an example of Dan Crenshaw was specifically calling out Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it was because it was on, like, some law about censorship or something like that. And he was talking about, look at her in her performative activism, because when she's asked to, like, support these laws or get involved in it, she's not really been involved in passing any major laws. She's mostly been involved in acting like the victim and fundraising off of it. And she's raised millions upon millions upon millions of dollars off of doing that, off of this performative activism, because she's a known name, even though she hasn't necessarily been that involved with the passing of policy.
Wasn't that how AOC kind of came in as well, though? It's when these, like, radical new Congress people come in there.
That's true to an extent, because you got to learn the ropes, and maybe you could excuse part of it being by she's learning the ropes because she's
inexperienced. Yeah,
I think she switched very quickly. Like, I remember when the Green New Deal, I think Mitch McConnell let the Green New Deal go to, like, the Senate floor or whatever for a vote, and it, like, completely fucking tanked. And I think afterwards she started to switch more towards, like, a type of cooperative bridge building type of congressional strategy.
Not only that, but I think she was involved in a lot of things that is directly, like, it's kind of hard to explain because I'm not from New York, but a lot of politicians, their actions are literally, like, involved in making sure that you shove a part of a bill, a piece of a bill into it that helps guarantee something in your community, in your district, like some funding for this or some funding for that. Some people would call that pork barrel politics, but she's learning how to do that a lot too. And I just haven't seen that same thing from Marjorie Taylor Greene. But again, that doesn't mean that can't be something that happens.
It's her first,
in the future.
she's new. Yeah.
Good.
Maybe all I know is AOC's a sellout because she stopped going on Jimmy Dore's podcast. That's what Jimmy Dore tells me.
Do you think like 5 years from now it's gonna be like, yeah, Jimmy Dore is just a complete fucking grifter? I can't believe he's like a futuristic technologist, like
Bruh.
he's anti-futuristic technologist, a communist or whatever.
Bruh,
Like 10 years from now, Cory Bush just sold out completely. You know, who the fuck would like Mike from PA? You know, he's not even a pro like anarcho radical. A syndicalist, spiritual, lyrical,
Well,
miracle.
the problem with what you're saying is you're saying it from a communist anarch. The Jimmy Dore is building an audience of more and more right wingers due to a lot of his anti-vax videos, and he's building that community. And so I find it hard to believe that he could go any further to the left from where he currently is, like to the communist sphere.
He's left.
Like
he's left on a lot of
he is,
weird stuff.
when he'll come out and like say something like pro BLM, for example, you'll like check it and he gets.
He hates cops. He hates cops. I'm ashamed to say I used to be a Jimmy Dore fan actually when I was first getting into politics.
Oh, don't worry. I used to wake up for like a solid like week or two. I used to wake up every morning right around 7 a.m. Brew my daily get some Diet Coke, like brew like a daily cup of coffee, load up my Excel spreadsheets for my work back when I was working with like convention management and shit, and I'm gonna go to thehill.com to watch the latest episode of Rising with Crystal and Soccer.
Jeez.
It was the biggest mistake of my life right there.
We've all grown.
People talk about Crystal and Sagar, but the worst person to ever really host that show was Kim Iverson by a long shot.
Oh, that clip! I remember that one clip. It was cringe. I can't remember what happened.
I tried to set up a debate between me and her on foreign policy with modern day debates, and she apparently rejected it. What could have been, you know? Could have been. I wanted to talk to her about her takes on Lebanon and how it was done by the CIA to undermine China. I wanted to talk to her about her evidence because it was very interesting.
I don't think usually. I feel like I talked to an like a Uyghur genocide denier and like a tanky once, and like I just remember them linking, like I asked them like, do you have any like evidence of this, and like they said they didn't have any evidence, and I would like explain to them like you probably need something, and then all they could do was like link some like 100-page Google Doc of just a bunch of random Google links to like the most random sites ever. I feel like
I know the Google Doc you're talking about has been linked to me too. But then of course the counter would be, Gappy, you're the one claiming that there is something going on, so you are the one who would have to provide evidence.
That is true, right? That is true, yeah. But the difference is I feel like we can actually provide, evidence, albeit we might not be able to provide like a direct confession or something. There's definitely circumstantial and direct evidence for shit like the Uyghur genocide versus like, I don't know, what do we have? We have some like random link talking about like if you connect the UN to the WHO and like there's this one dude who might have received some sort of funds, this one bread tuber as well. Maybe we're all in on the conspiracy.
Before we get down the Uyghur rabbit hole right now, I think we should continue the Trump interview.
Total fools.
Let me read you some short quotes. The first is by one of the judges, one of the 10 judges you appointed who ruled on this, and there were many judges, but 10 who you appointed. Brett Ludwig, U.S. District Court in Wisconsin, who was nominated by you in 2020. He's on the bench, and he says, quote, "This court allowed the plaintiff the chance to make his case, and he has lost on the merits." Another quote, Corey Langhofer, your own campaign attorney in Arizona, November 12, 2020, quote, "We are not alleging fraud in this lawsuit. We are not alleging anyone stealing the election." And also Rudy Giuliani, your lawyer, November 18, 2020 in Pennsylvania, quote, "This is not a fraud case. Your own lawyers had no evidence of fraud. They said in court they had no evidence of fraud, and the judges ruled against you every time on the merits."
I love how like peacefully he's saying it with like zero anger, basically zero aggression. He's being firm while saying it with his calm NPR voice. I've never heard a more
professional right here.
It's the NPR cadence.
I've never heard an NPR cadence execute a man live on television.
It kind of reminds me of that time that Ben Shapiro was in the UK and he got really tilted and he started yelling at the
he called one of the most famous conservative
he called him a liberal.
He called him a liberal, yeah.
Yeah.
It was too early to ask for fraud and to talk about fraud. Rudy said that because of the fact it was very early, because that was obviously at a that was a long time ago. The things that have found out have more than bore out what people thought and what people felt and what people found. When you look at Langhofer, I disagree with him as an attorney. I did not think he was a good attorney to hire. I don't know what his game is, but I will just say this. You look at the findings, you look at the number of votes, go into Detroit and just ask yourself, is it true that there are more votes than there are voters? Look at Pennsylvania, look at Philadelphia. Is it true that there were far more votes than there were voters?
It is not true that there were far.
It is not a pretty tough problem.
It is not true that there were far more votes than voters. There was an early count. I've noticed you've talked about this in rallies,
Far
and
more
you said
votes than
reportedly
voters.
this is true. I think even you know that that was an early report that was corrected later.
Well, you take a look at it. You take a look at Detroit. In fact,
just
they
said he
even had
did.
a hard time getting people to sign off on it because it was so out of balance. They called it out of balance. So you take a look at it. You know the real truth, Steve. And this election was a rigged election.
Look at Steve's face.
Why is it that you think that the vast majority of your allies in the United States Senate are not standing behind you? We did have that statement by Mike Rounds.
Because Mitch McConnell is a loser. And frankly, Mitch McConnell, if he were on the other side and if Schumer were put in his position, he would have been fighting this like you've never.
This is great. I love it. I
God
love this
damn,
infighting.
bro.
People don't know Republicans infight. It might not be to the same degree, or we don't see it as much because we don't read those news sources. But they are infighting. They are infighting hard right now.
That Marjorie Taylor Greene and Dan Crenshaw one, I just found out about that last week as well. I'm like, what the fuck? What are they fighting about?
The Republican infighting is to a way bigger, like a magnitudes greater degree than anything that happens right now with the Democratic Party, period. Like, again, I think it's really going to transform what happens in the primary, because we're just going to be seeing who can be the most like Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she's the most popular to like Trump supporters.
I think there's two stages here, though. There's like a legislative type of infighting, and then there is a power struggle type of infighting, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, who is in control, what side of the party. I think most of the Republican Party seems to be in lockstep on the legislation side, right? On trying to undermine it. Now, there's certain times when that doesn't happen. The infrastructure bill would be the most obvious example, when they were able to get, what, Biden got like 66, 67 votes in the Senate, was able to get like 16 Republicans to sign on, but which is an amazing achievement. But do you think that there's a different? Do you think they're as infighting on legislation as they are in the power struggle right now? I would lean more talking about the power struggle.
Yeah, it's definitely more on the power struggle.
Yeah, I was gonna say right now they're pretty focused on just stopping everything Democrats suggest. Right, that's the game plan. Hunker down.
Hunker down. Hunker down. The old Republican strategy. That's one thing Mitch McConnell is very good at doing.
No, he's a loser. Donald Trump just told me.
Yeah, true.
Imagine he's like Mitch McConnell. That guy's a scumbag, loser, fucking piece. He just starts going off.
He's a cock. He's a cock. You know what? Fentanyl the Dragon told me.
You know what? I agree with Trump. Mitch McConnell is a loser, which is why everyone should be working for Charles Booker for U.S. Senate in 2022.
Hey,
okay? At least one Democratic person from Kentucky to be right next to Mitch McConnell and hold him accountable. All right.
He polled better than what was her name that actually ended up going.
Amy McGrath.
Amy McGrath. My God.
She literally had like, I think it was like, was it 10 million or 30 million? I don't know, but she had a metric fuck ton of money, and she almost threw at the primary level. Like, I think Charles Booker got his $1 million, like hit the $1 million fundraising mark within like the last month of the campaign, and he bought like a fucking bus and like spent on some crazy random shit that probably wasn't worth it in terms of voter turnout, and he still almost won. That's insane.
Bro, I mean, like, and he polled better against Mitch McConnell than Amy McGrath did. I mean, he's still a long shot. Mitch McConnell has a stranglehold on that district. Of course he does, because that's his seat of power.
Like a big family of turtles living in that district.
yeah, the turtle lobby is very behind him.
The turtle turnout is high.
Turtle turnout, hell yeah. But he still has a better chance than Amy McGrath did. I'm gonna be honest.
Never seen before. He would have been fighting this, because when you look at it, and this is a long way from over. You take a look at what's going on now in Pennsylvania. Take a look at what's going on in Wisconsin. You just take a look. Now, we had a lot of cases where the judges wouldn't hear them. We had a case in Nevada that was so good. When you read the papers, it's impossible. The judge refused to even listen to it. We had many cases. In fact, they say, and I can't testify because it's been through a lot of systems, a lot of different systems, but they say, and they say very strongly, the judges just, nobody's really gotten...
Do you want to know one of the biggest difficulties I found while trying to disprove Trump? Is when he just uses the word they, and I'm trying to, like who is they? And then like sometimes I'll dig and I'll just find out it's like some random Twitter
Many
account,
people.
some
Many
random
people.
yeah, many people. Either he makes up they, because if you say they, then he can brag or make a claim without him being the source. Therefore, they can't challenge him. They have to go challenge whoever they is. Right, or I'll find out sometimes there's some random Twitter account that's completely unsourced, and that's probably one of the biggest problems with disproving Trump is he'll just make a claim, give you no links, and then it's your job to go do the digging.
Well, the idea is that the vagueness kind of helps in a way because his supporters can then fill in the blanks, right? Like for some
Yes,
people,
exactly.
they might be the Democrats. They might be insert protected class here. They might be the anti-fentanyl, the
bankers.
Cheecom Dragons
Ooh.
people, you know?
Anyway.
It's kind of
They
like
can literally fill it in for whatever.
it's kind of like how some people do it on Twitch.
A chance to look at the United States Supreme Court. They refused to hear the case. And you had, I
They
guess,
said there was no
19
standing to
states
give the
suing.
case. That's correct.
Well,
Can I
yeah,
just
no
ask?
standing. I know, no standing. And the president of the United States supposedly didn't have standing either. So I wanted to file it myself. They said, "Sir, you don't have standing." I said, "Wait a minute. I'm the president of the United States. They just rigged an election. Hundreds of
Wait, I like the idea. Wait, I'm the president. By default, I have standing. Like, wait, what? That's not how that works.
Man thinks he's king.
thousands of votes in different states. They just rigged an election. We got a number of votes that I think you'll agree no sitting president has ever gotten the number of votes that I got. No
A lot of
sitting
votes.
president
That's true.
has ever gotten
A lot of
sitting president. Nobody believes. You think Biden got 80 million votes?
It's true.
I don't believe
it's
it.
true that you got
mean he
more
got
than
him
any
sitting
sitting
in his
president
basement?
in the
He
election
got
you've
80
disputed.
How come he couldn't?
If
then
I
how
can,
come
Mr.
Biden-
President, Mr. President.
Let me ask you this question. How come Biden couldn't attract 20 people for a crowd? How come when he went to speak in different locations, nobody came to watch?
This is like such an easy answer. I hear this talking point all the time. Like, how could he have won the election if crowd size, whatever? Number one, that's not how elections work. Elections are not having big crowd sizes. There is something called like passive like support, right? Where there's people, and I see this all the time in local races too, where they just like, I remember listening to my grandmother tell me why she liked, oh my gosh, not Larry Hogan. I'm trying to remember Steny Hoyer, and he was like, "Oh, I met his dog one time. The dog was adorable. It was so nice." And da da da. That's not somebody who deeply supports Steny Hoyer. That's someone who's like, "Wow, he's so lovely, and he helped my government building in this one thing, and so I really like Steny, or I like him enough, or I know Steny, or I know this person, and I at least like them more than the other person." And so if you have someone like Trump who was historically unpopular, right, and you have a bunch of people who are just passively supportive of Biden enough because they remember Obama, and they certainly like the Obama president more than the Trump one, and then Biden also had his core base of support on top of that, then that's easily enough for him to get over the line. But just because you don't like Trump doesn't mean you're going to go to a Biden rally, right? If somebody gave me the options of Steny Hoyer versus, I don't know, Donald Trump, I'm going to vote Steny Hoyer. That doesn't mean, though, that I'm going to go to Steny Hoyer rallies and go rah-rah Steny. And that's completely besides the fact that the Democratic Party and the Democratic base have taken, just as a percentage, COVID more seriously when it comes to preparing their rallies and when it comes to like mail-in voting. That also explains the mail-in voting phenomenon quite clearly.
Do you remember?
And Biden encouraged mail-in voting while Donald Trump discouraged it.
Remember when people were like, how could Biden have won? Look at his rallies. People who were in cars and shit. And they're like, that's somehow proof that not a lot of people voted for him because they purposely
Well, if we
did
vote
smaller
by crowd
rallies.
size, then yes, Donald Trump would win. But I don't think that's how we vote in this country. Such a terrible
Wait,
point.
maybe that's why they got the chip in the vaccine so that they could just go by crowd size votes. That's your registered vote.
Amen.
But all of a sudden, he got 80 million votes. Nobody believes
if you'll forgive me,
that,
maybe because
Nobody
the election
believes
was
that.
about you. If I can just move on to ask, are you telling Republicans in 2022 that they must press your case on the past election in order to get your endorsement? Is that an absolute?
They're going to do whatever they want to do. Whatever they have to do, they're going to do.
That's
But
just a
the
dodge.
ones
So
that are
whack.
smart,
Complete
the ones
dodge.
that know,
I mean,
you take a
it's-
look at
Just a complete dodge, man.
I mean,
They're
he's
gonna
been
do
dodging
whatever
everything
they
in this
do.
discussion.
He's
so
a truth
far.
teller. He has no filter. Completely dodges the question.
Again, you take a look at how Carrie Lake is doing running for governor. She's very big on this issue. She's leading by a lot. People have no idea how big this issue is, and they don't want it to happen again. It shouldn't be allowed to happen, and they don't want it to happen again. And the only way it's not going to happen again is you have to solve the problem of the presidential rigged election of 2020.
Mr.
Steve,
President,
thank
if
you
I'm
very much. I
one more
appreciate it.
question. I want to ask about a court hearing yesterday on January 6th. Judge Amit Mehta, he's gone. Okay.
He just stormed off. He didn't like the questions. He didn't like it.
VC'd.
Well, you know, NPR had sources, but Donald Trump had they.
Are you sure he didn't get DDoS? You know, are you sure he didn't get moved and shook?
Dylan was behind it.
Moving and shaking, baby, always and constantly.
You know, he pays taxes. He has a business. That's cyber terrorism.
It really sucks that we had a president. So I'm sorry, that's just pathetic. I mean, that's
I mean,
not good.
It just goes to show how important it is. And I mean, the people are gonna say, "Oh, this is soy," but it's important that you guys all go vote. And more importantly, or just as importantly, if you have the time, volunteer for the local campaign, help do some door knocking or some canvassing or some phone calls, because that can make a big difference, right? The reason why Bernie was able to last out for so long relative to all the other candidates was because he had like literally an insane amount of volunteers and a kick-ass field organizing group, right? Relative to every other organization, or not every other organization.
Even in the states he lost, I saw many times he would have better organizing than the people who actually won the states. It was just due to, like, for example, South Carolina, I would say they had better organizing than the Biden campaign. But Biden was just liked, really liked, I guess, in the South Carolina Democratic base.
Yeah, you got some really key endorsements there. I mean, there's always more to a campaign than the field organizing.
That was one of the biggest mistakes of Bernie, is he didn't do the work for the endorsements. And he even admits that he's not a back patter and wishing you a happy birthday type of guy.
Mm-hmm. But it still means that, like, especially at the local level, for just a congressional race, like a congressional district race versus like an entire country, field organizing is going to have a much bigger impact. So make sure you go volunteer for that stuff. It helps out field organizers a ton.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Right there. You. I am starting a Patreon. I know you guys have been asking for it on the YouTube crowd for a while, since usually it's just the Twitch people who could support me financially directly, but we're finally making a means for you guys to do so as well. And that's not all. You can support the #1 cyber terrorist, mover and shaker, Vince McMahon of Twitch politics. How? By donating to this Patreon and getting benefits like movie nights, special Discord roles, announcements at the end of the video of how much you have supported this war criminal DylanBurnsTV, and much, much more. Okay, not much more, okay? I only have limited means, but more than that, I can assure you. And if you support the Patreon, you will have my deep-hearted appreciation from the bottoms of my soul that you are truly a mover and shaker. Thanks so much for your Patreon money in advance. I will use it to continue to fund the liberal elitist agenda.